We start with the latest on the wave of voting restrictions that are taking shape across the United States. A group of nonprofit civic organizations are suing Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger after Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed a sweeping overhaul of the state's election laws. You'll remember Raffensperger is former President Trump who pressured former President Trump, whom former President Trump pressured to overturn November's election results in that now infamous conference call. This is just the first of many expected challenges to the sweeping voting restrictions. Bloomberg U.S. legal team reporter Eric Larson joins us now for more. Hey, Eric, thanks so much for being here. Take us through
thanks for having me.
So take us through what exactly the restrictions that were signed into law yesterday by the governor of Georgia, and then also what the organizations that are suing are saying.
Sure. There are several restrictions that apply to both absentee voting, which was, of course, very popular this last year, and also in-person voting. On the absentee ballot side, it prohibits the states from sending out unsolicited absentee ballot applications to people. So it adds that extra step of people needing to actually specifically ask for it. And it also prevents people from dropping them off in ballot drop boxes and things like that. And on the in-person voting side, it restricts hours, but really slashes hours for in-person voting for the runoff election, and even prohibits any groups or organizations from giving food or water to people who are stuck waiting in long lines.
Yeah.
And as the suit points out, a lot of these longer lines are in lower income neighborhoods or minority majority neighborhoods. So it's part of the alleged discriminatory nature of this.
It's really puzzling, I think, to a lot of people how one could say that providing food or water to somebody in line to vote is unlawful. Can you take us into the thinking there?
Well, I'm not sure that they really explained it too clearly. I'm not actually really sure. But I can say that overall, the Republicans have said that these measures are needed to prevent voter fraud, but which, of course, is interesting because Secretary of State Raffensperger, who, of course, is the defendant in this suit, had made it clear that Georgia didn't have any vast amounts of voter fraud, didn't have any voter fraud. They did recounts. And everything came out just fine. And that's one of the reasons that former President Trump was so angry with him. So you had all these officials saying that everything went just fine, and yet they said that they needed to have this law put in place. And the argument in the complaint is that they're doing it specifically to make it harder for Black Georgians to vote, and they were sort of decisive, this group, in this election, and allegedly Republicans are doing whatever they can to make sure that doesn't happen again.
So what happens now when it comes to the lawsuit that is being filed to sue the Secretary of State? Is there a chance that this could go to the Supreme Court?
You know, with any case like this, of course, it could go to the Supreme Court. And we're seeing how consequential Georgia was in these recent elections. So it's no small matter how this turns out. The state is going to defend this, I'm sure, very, very hard in courts. It's in a federal court in Atlanta. And they're going to have to defend these claims that all of these different provisions are not an undue burden on the right to vote in the Constitution. They say it violates the First and 14th Amendments. That when you make these laws around voting, you're not supposed to restrict voting. There's not supposed to be an undue restriction on voting. So they're going to have to prove, the state is going to have to prove to defend this law that all these provisions do not make it more difficult for anyone to vote, and that there's still a way for people to vote if they want. But the evidence laid out in the lawsuit shows a long history of different measures in Georgia to restrict Black people from voting, and they're saying that this is just the latest.
Eric, what are the chances that, I mean, look, we already know that there are Republican state legislatures throughout the United States that are working on similar legislation in the wake of the 2020 election. What are the ripple effects that this law could have in other states?
Well, I think that other states are working on similar laws. I'm sure that, we know they are. I'm sure they'll be looking to see how this pans out, but I'm not so sure that they'll wait to see if Georgia's law succeeds before passing their own. Of course, President Biden has made it clear that he is concerned about this as well. They're calling it the new Jim Crow, really putting a lot of attention on the attempts by these states to do this. I mean, we had former Attorney General Bill Barr, Trump's own AG, all kinds of intelligence community officials saying that, there was no vast amount of voter fraud. All these claims were thrown out in court. Even many Republican officials saying this, and Trump's appointees are saying this, and yet these state legislatures are insisting that there was, they're buying into this big conspiracy theory and using it as justification to pass these laws, or trying to. So whether or not the courts will agree that a conspiracy theory essentially justifies restricting voting in any way remains to be seen.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.